Hello and welcome to UKAuthority Live with me, Helen Olsen-Bedford. Today we're going to be talking about the public sector's use of cloud, breaking the ties that bind, moving from legacy to cloud. It does seem that cloud has been around for a very long time. In fact, as a technical and marketing term, it's been used for over a decade. The benefits of pay-as-you-go or pay only for what you use and the flexible infrastructure and SaaS offerings, these have all been discussed in many a forum. But if cloud is that good, why isn't all of the public sector in the cloud today? What's stopping the migration from legacy to on-premise operations? And what are those much sold benefits? Are they realisable? So joining me in the studio today to discuss the pros and cons of the move to cloud, I have Tom Zebedee, Deputy Director of Technology at Ofsted. Sorry, folks. Anna Assasser, Chief Executive from Tyskie Limited, and Darren Bassett, who's a former Deputy Director of IT Delivery at the Department for Education, who's now at Tyskie, but I want to talk about the DFE experience here. Please, as ever, join in. Use the chat facility to put questions through to me, but please remember, add your name and where you're from so that I can put those in reference when I put the questions through to the panel. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. So, the benefits of cloud, as I just said, they're well known. Why isn't the public sector on the cloud en masse? Darren, from the DFE's point of view, because you took them to cloud.
Exactly, that's a great question, Helen, thank you. So, government's had a cloud-first policy for 5 years now, 2013. It's implemented a lot of supporting processes, things like digital marketplace, G-Cloud, networks and fora like Digital Leaders Network, Technology Leaders Network. So actually, there are plenty of people that have done it, and actually, the spend through G-Cloud last year was in excess of £1 billion. So quite a lot of public sector bodies are moving to cloud, and that is growing year on year. So I just think there's still quite a lot of kind of fear or a lack of understanding about what cloud actually is. So the issue for me isn't necessarily about technology. It's about people and humans and kind of perceptions of change and doing something different. Things have worked perfect for the last 10 years, haven't they? So, why should we change? And I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to explore that in a bit more detail later.
Thank you, Darren. And Tom, you are in the process of looking at the move to cloud at the moment. So again, that's another perspective. So tell me about that. What are the drivers looking to move to cloud?
Well, I think it's all those benefits that people are looking for, agility, resilience and all that. We're not quite as far along as the DFE were, but I think new applications, we're moving, we wouldn't put them on premise or on our infrastructure now. We'd usually take those and take them from the cloud. So I guess there's something there about legacy. I guess there's something there about integration. But my journey at the minute is really about bringing my people, and I've got a great team leading on this, but they need to understand the cloud a little bit better than they do now, and so our emphasis is really understanding how we'd use the cloud, but also what it means for us and our people. So I think you've got to get ready to get into the cloud. It just doesn't happen like that, and that takes a little bit of time to get your people ready.
Anna, what are your thoughts? Because you've seen it from the other side, from the supplier side, because I believe you did work with the DFE on some of their cloud solutions.
Absolutely.
So is the two perspectives here of people that are going to cloud, absolutely, and still trying to make sure that people are really understood that they get maximum benefit? Does that kind of sum up, do you think?
I think everybody understands now that you do get a benefit from the cloud. I think people have taken a while to be able to realise their budgets. So people had invested in the tin. And there was a real false sense of security, that actually if you have a box in the corner of the room, it was somehow more secure than Microsoft's Azure services that are penetration tested, that have got all of the security protection already provided for you. I think with recent events within healthcare, within central government, where actually people have been targeting public sector to get on into their infrastructure, people realise that box is no safer. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's very much more vulnerable. What we want to use is move to these wide platforms such as Dynamics and use all of that built-in protection and really gain from it. There has always been financial gains. I think people have always seen that, being able to spread costs and not have huge upfront costs that take a long time to be realised. But I think now everybody's getting an understanding of the security that took a little while for people to really get their heads around.
Does that chime with the experience at the DFE? So was the security, that was a key issue at the beginning?
Absolutely. So at the time we started on our cloud journey, which goes back to 2014. I mean, one of the things that we really had at the Department for Education, which was invaluable, was top table board level support. So without that, it would have been incredibly difficult. But we had some challenges with the CIRO we had at the time within the organisation, and we had to do an awful lot of work with him and his team around cloud being secure. Because the starting point was cloud isn't secure, right? Because it's not in the data centre that the DFE have currently got. So we went on quite an education journey with some of our senior leaders, and we took them into the data centre. And I because I didn't even know where it was, because we tended not to advertise where it was, because you don't want people rocking up at your data centre and asking to look around.
Yeah.
And they kind of think, well, this is a bit. This is where all our telephony, all our video conferencing, all our email service running out of this. Well, what happens if we have an issue with this building? Good question. What happens if we have an issue with this building? All of a sudden those services are unavailable, and you've got 5,500 staff that can't work. So we went on that journey to demonstrate actually there was a business need to move services for increased flexibility, and then there was also the need to educate people about security, about policy. Just because you've got a bit of tin sat here that's connected to the internet, how can a government body protect the data centre better than someone else? So I've been fortunate enough to go to Microsoft Azure Data Centre in Dublin with its anti-tank moat and its
anti-tank moat.
Yes, and in its non-specific and it's huge. I reckon I could probably just about find my way there, but it would be quite difficult to do that. The levels of security, the levels of access, the access to get in through the building is it's like going through airport security to get into that building. The controls in place. I'd be delighted if all public sector bodies could demonstrate the same level of security and access management of their physical data centres, but I'd be a little bit surprised if they could actually do it.
Does that chime with you, Tom?
Yeah, I took some advice from a colleague at the DFE who's left now, and so we're a little bit further behind. But I took my Chief Operating Officer, Matthew Coffey, over to Dublin just to look, because I just wanted him to understand really, what's there, what it looks like, what it feels like, the cost of that if we tried to replicate it. We've also been lucky or unlucky, depending on what way you look at it. We had the Holborn fire, which affected our building for 2 weeks and didn't affect our services at all because we've got no on-premise infrastructure. We use Office 365, so people were able to work. They weren't able to go to the building, but they were able to work with no downtime. So I think a lot of the kind of benefits in resilience and in that area have been sort of borne out through events, and I've tried quite hard to tie people in and at least understand where what it is they're buying into. And we're halfway there. We've got a virtualized infrastructure. It's in someone else's data center, so it isn't such a big leap to then say, and actually it's not going to be my tin anymore, and I'm going to manage it in a very different way. I'm probably halfway along that road.
So the other point I'd make as well is a lot of the applications that the Department for Education had, certainly some of the ageing legacy ones, had never had any kind of security impact assessment or privacy impact assessment or any of the security work done on them. Because back then,
obviously they all have now.
Yeah, but they have. So people are saying, moving it from where it is now to cloud is riskier, and I'd say, how can you demonstrate that? You give me your risk profile of your current services running out of our in-house data centres. When was the last time you did an impact assessment on security? We haven't done one, or it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago. And I'm going, well, okay, so you can't demonstrate. As part of the journey to cloud, we will do that work with you, and we will do that impact assessment, so you will actually know what the risks are associated with it. So that helped with the education process around security and people feeling much more comfortable. We didn't just lob applications into an Azure environment and go, there you go, they're going to run the same. Actually, it was an opportunity to upgrade where possible, which we certainly did with Dynamic CRM, an opportunity to improve the information and knowledge we had about the applications themselves, and also an opportunity to retire quite a lot of the applications which actually had no little or very little business value.
I mean, is that the shift to cloud and to, say, platforms? Can you actually lose some of the legacy? You don't need to buy like for like. Can you combine systems?
I think it takes towards a better customer experience. And I think Microsoft have to be focused, and cloud providers in general, but Microsoft very specifically, especially in the case of DFE, have to be focused on this. Because in practicality, you can switch things off. It is a month-by-month commitment that you make to actually use this infrastructure, and I think it does mean that you're not paying to support legacy systems. So whilst you can transfer them easily to the cloud, you can review your whole data centre, which I know DFE did. You can save a substantial amount of money by only running them when you need to. So there are a lot of benefits from that.
Yeah, I think you want to try and avoid a hybrid if you're going to all do that, because you don't want to be in a place where you've got your own kind of legacy infrastructure and then everything else in the cloud. You're kind of in the worst of all worlds then. So I think the likes of Microsoft have to be able to stand up legacy applications in the cloud if they can, because you're left in a place where you're neither one thing nor the other, and that's not where most people want to be.
Just going back to the cyber security side and the culture side, how easy is it to educate and take people with you? Was it the cyber security that was the killer argument? What is the key argument? So say our viewers who are out there today and they're looking at trying to get buy-in from leadership teams for the move to cloud. What are the key things that have worked for you, Tom?
I think it depends who you're talking to. I think if you're speaking to finance colleagues, they're interested in avoiding big capital spend. So cloud obviously offers you the opportunity to smooth that out across many years. I think if you're talking to your security people, they're interested in the benefits there. If you're talking to maybe your chief statistician, they're interested in how do I get to a lot of compute power quite quickly and a lot of storage. So they're interested in agility and being able to scale things up. So I think depends. There's something for everyone maybe in the audience.
Something for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of communication and stakeholder management required in any. I mean, these tend to be very large programs. I mean, the other thing that I couldn't emphasise enough is having a really strong user focus as well. So a lot of this is around providing better services to either internal staff or citizens that will rely on government for those services. And cloud can offer that mobility in a way that a load of on-premise services generally can't. So if you can identify what the various points of resistance would be from individuals. So if you're an information security professional or you work in data protection, you're paranoid. Today about
You're
GDPR.
Paranoid. Are you paranoid in general about GDPR?
Well, yeah, you don't want to lose data, and that's absolutely right. That's what someone has professional expertise to make sure you don't lose data. So you bring them in and go, okay, so what is the assurance you need? Well, actually, I need this, and I need to know what level of encryption is used in sharing data. I need to know what your perimeter controls are going to be. You can get into very kind of technical detail with them and designing the services. You get them at the start and say, there you go. So you can take them on the journey, but as Tom said, you've got to. There are different motivating driving factors for different people. But if you don't understand the internal challenges and resistances, then you just won't succeed. And I think there is potential for people to go, do you know what? It just sounds a little bit hard, doesn't it? I've got to get all these people in this place to do it. Why would I bother? But actually, the benefits are massive. So the point about the Holborn fire. When there was snow fairly recently, I'm sure all DFE staff will be fully able to work from whichever location they want to do, as long as they've got broadband at home.
It's the physical infrastructure that let us down there. It's the number of ports you have and your VPN service and stuff like that. The actual cloud-based systems work really well.
I think Azure gets you around some of that, and I know that's perhaps why you're looking at some of it. I think the other thing that the cloud does is encourage you to move to the latest versions of these things. So things that were secure once often become less secure associated with VPN connections and things like that. In the cloud, it's already there. You are encouraged to move forward on each version. Certainly in the case of Dynamics, there is a time period where you need to move forward. And that's a good thing, not a bad one, because actually what you're doing is not only benefiting from the security, but the new features and keeping the organisation up to date. And that momentum, I believe, public sector really benefits from, and that's why I really want everybody to move in that direction.
So that's the concept of the evergreen IT, and gone are the days of having to do mass upgrades to the next generation or version. Is that in your thinking then, Tom?
Yeah, so I think there's a little coalescence here between cloud, bring your own device, all that kind of stuff. So if you were to go truly cloud, you'd have no build. You just look at everything through a browser. And that would take away quite a lot of I think quite a lot of the footprint that IT has in an organisation, because you know people aren't having to come along and upgrade things and migrate email and all that kind of stuff that we've always had to do in the past. So I think you know there's a kind of wider agenda that cloud enables. It's just at what cost, I think, and at what speed is you know kind of the issue for us.
How comfortable is it for, say, some of your colleagues, the people who've been doing all of those upgrades, all of those transfers, etc.? How keen are they to shift? Is there any threat that you might need less people on infrastructure?
I think there's a little bit of that, yeah. I don't think people articulate it in that way, but people know that things are changing. But it's, you know, it's a technology division, so you'd expect us to be wanting to be at the forefront of whatever technology comes along. So I wouldn't want to trade on that too much, but that's clearly important to us. We want to be doing things in the most modern way that we can. And, you know,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to take people with you for a variety of reasons. One is a hell of a lot cheaper to retrain the staff you've currently got as opposed to going out and bringing a load of new people in. But people tend to work in areas like IT because they like change. I think if you like change and you work in technology, you're probably in the wrong job. You know, I'd say be an accountant or something. That's probably being very dismissive of accountants. I apologise sincerely for that. But but if you don't want to work with new technologists, then
technology's not
it's not the right place. Now at DFE we had some people within the technology function who thought that if they couldn't hug the server, it wasn't real. If they couldn't see a little flashing light on it, then you know how could they know it was actually working? And then so we worked a lot with Microsoft to try and upskill and train people, and that did mean bringing in some external support to do the training. But actually, we did a full capability review of the IT function with a 3 to 5 year assessment of where we were, where we wanted to be, and what the gap analysis was to do within it. And that was looking at all aspects of IT, and that was really powerful because actually we then said, well, we need to put £250,000 a year into learning and development for our team. We need to put people on Microsoft certified courses, and people like that. You're investing in them. You're helping them. So you're not just going, there you go. There's a new loaded tin. There's a management console somewhere. I don't know where it is. Can you rock up next Monday and make sure it all works? So by working with people, and the mantra we had was change from within. It wasn't being done to them. I'm not saying 100% everyone felt that was definitely the case, but I'd say for 98% it certainly was, and that helped to smooth the transition and also kind of narrow the gap with where we were in terms of our capability and where we needed to get to.
And that's a continuous process on the
Absolutely.
Development of digital skills, etc.
Yeah.
And being on the side of a partner, I'm really pleased that you were putting £250,000 into your own people and not just bleeding it into a partner perhaps that at the time may have exited. I think we do a lot of blended team approach, so actually people keep the skills in-house. And it is exciting for your internal teams to learn about the newest technology, and actually then they can leave with it. It is not the kind of thing that where they are the only people in control of the system. Legacy systems can be a little bit, we need those 4 people and can be held to ransom by those 4 people. What we've got now is an age of products really that will move with you, but those skills are transferable. But what we want to do is get people within public sector actually understanding them, so this stops from being a big consultancy, land and expand, you can never get rid of us, to in the nicest possible way, to a let's do an agile project, work alongside you, see an outcome. That's what's really exciting, is you very quickly see something.
So you're building a skills transfer into that whole process?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's critical.
Yeah, I mean, our work at the minute it's discovery work really, and it's really tech user led. It's not being led by the leadership of the division. We're involved, but at the minute it's really about people trying to discover what the cloud might offer us, what a phased move to the cloud might look like, and my people know a lot more about this than I do, which feels right at the minute because they'll need me to go and make a business case and, do all those kind of governance things that are required to get us right over the line. But it feels like the right way to do it at the minute, so they're finding out about it themselves rather than kind
so
of
that's
being
part of the
told
skills
to do
transfer
it.
and the development in the first
and I
place.
think it's about buy-in as well. If there is a little bit of resistance there, it's your colleagues who are learning about this, so work with them.
So what are the key drivers for you? Let's look at some of the kind of the burning platforms today, the key drivers. We've talked about a few issues so far. So what is the key thing for you, for your business case on moving to cloud?
Well, I think there'll be two really key elements to it. One, we'll want to avoid a capital reinvestment around our own equipment.
So it's a cost.
We've got
Cost avoidance.
10 in 2 data centres, and we've got, backups and restore and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of, there'll be a lot of money in that. But it'll really be about capability. It'll really be about resilience. It'll be about, how can I provision the kind of IT that Ofsted wants going forward in a way that allows it to, call down compute, call down storage, just be able to present that to people in a way which I just can't at the minute. I don't have that flexibility. I've got some of it, but I haven't got all of it. And so I think those are the two really big drivers. The first one's probably easier to make in a business case sense than the second one, because it's much harder to put a value on, agility and storage and compute and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to need my users to say, yes, I want that. And that's a really, really important thing for this organisation to have. I think financially, there's a big cost to be avoided, and that shouldn't be too hard to make that case, but we shall see.
What about the business case at DFE?
The business case, I think it would have been thrown out of most corporate boardrooms, if I'm being perfectly honest with it, because we were very honest and said this isn't necessarily about driving massive cost savings, because we took it as an opportunity to invest in new ways of technology. So we had a video conferencing platform that involved you sitting in a room with various other people to conference between different rooms, yet we had a desire for people, if you've got someone based up in Cumbria whose nearest office is in Darlington, not the easiest place to get to. So if you're more kind of field based as a member of staff. So, and also then we had, to be honest, the biggest driver in the business case was someone had made a decision to leave our central London office and move just about 1.5 miles down the road to Westminster without necessarily fully understanding the data centre at the bottom of it. So the business case was kind of, we need to either lift and shift services somewhere else, which comes at a cost, or we need to, so we took that as an opportunity to upgrade, rebuild, retire and migrate services to Azure that we felt were right. So, but the key real benefits for us were about flexibility of internal staff to be able to work from any location at any time, and also flexibility in terms of deployment of applications. So if you want to put a new application in within your data center, you need to go out, run a procurement process, buy the hardware, get it in there, get it configured, get it ready. If you're lucky, 2 months later, you can start now deploying code to your application. Whereas with the Azure infrastructure DFE's got, the Microsoft, in theory, they demonstrated it to us in 7 minutes. DFE's got slightly longer SLAs for spinning up tin than that, but actually, so within a week, you've got environments that people start building on and deploying functionality.
So 2 months to a week.
Yeah.
2 months to a week, and that's a week is a kind of
advantage.
SLA. Yeah. And that makes government much more responsive to policy changes. Because if you're building a big system, you then need to go and get lots of infrastructure and host it somewhere and put contracts in place, as opposed to going, well, we can spin up some tin, build an alpha in 4 or 5 weeks. At the same time, you'd still be procuring the physical infrastructure you then want to deploy on. So it makes government much more agile in terms of its responding to policy challenges.
We're seeing that now with, we've got about, I suppose half's about right. About half of our infrastructure now is in the cloud, and quite a lot of that in the Office 365 suite. But we're starting to use Power Apps to begin to offer people little applications in terms of how they perceive and work with data, and that takes weeks as opposed to months. And that's a real challenge for a tech division, really, because we've got people who could do that as well, but we'd be using legacy apps and things just take a bit longer. So that again helps with the business case. You're going to be in a place where you are going to be demonstrably quite agile, and it's I think that will matter to business people. The users really want those things delivered to them very quickly, and the cloud offers that.
Do you think, though, today, I'm just wondering whether, is there a bit of a driver today around, say, GDPR and the need to have access to, say, a subject access request, all the data around a person? And if you've got it in across various data centres and systems, how is it easier to do that in the cloud or on premise? Darren?
My view is yes, it would be much easier. So, but again, it's much more than just technology. So there's a deeper cultural issue around collection, storage, and kind of management of data. If an organisation is tightly controls the information it's got and the data it holds and knows what they've got and where it is, responding to subject access requests becomes much more straightforward. So if you think of the work that was done at the Department for Education, so we catalogued where all the applications are, where they're hosted. So we know an awful lot more information from a technical point of view than we would have done before we started the journey. In terms of some of the core, kind of case management or customer engagement data sets, the kind of CRM estate was rationalised, working with TISCI to produce a relatively small number of CRM instances. Went from 13 down to 4 based on different.
So what, 13
different CRM instances.
CRMs?
Yeah, so with different data sets, because Team A wanted their own CRM and Team B, so we're able to rationalise some of the processes together, and so there was a business desire to be able to streamline and standardise processes. Great, a technology partner who going, well, actually, that's possible to do that, and the two things could work together very well. So, if there were a subject access request about I'm trying to think of kind of appropriate example, but so kind of safeguarding case.
Yeah.
Can you've got my details about that? It would be much easier today because of that information being held centrally than it would have been previously. But there's probably still a need for further technology to be able to track that kind of access request through as well, because there's large organisations have many people responsible for many different things. So actually, there's still a need for technology, in my view, to help people track and manage GDPR when it comes into force. Well, they should be tracking and managing subject access requests now anyway, but technology can be used further for that.
I mean, it is a big issue, isn't it? If you've got lots of different data sets, how are you going to manage those? Can they manage them on existing systems? If you've got a CRM, can you build that out into that, manage it in that? Or is it something, I'm going off on a bit of a sideways angle here, is it something you need to create a new, I mean, what about your data sets at Ofsted?
Complex.
Well, you can say, yes.
Yeah, complex. I think this whole the whole journey that you might be on to get into cloud, and in a way it's reflected in GDPR. If you have a lot of complexity and quite a lot of specialness and lots of different processes to kind of do very similar things, it does make those things hard to do, and you've got quite a big overhead trying to find what you know and what you've stored and where it's stored and all that kind of stuff. So taking everything that you have in legacy and putting it into the cloud and then throwing GDPR over the top of it, just because it's in the cloud doesn't make it any easier. I think there are tools that you might want to go to try and find some help to do that, and there's a couple of vendors out there who are doing that kind of thing. Probably organisations need to find out how hard GDPR is going to be before there'll be a real business case in organisation to go, can we not just make this simpler? So I think tools, cloud and simplification probably all kind of run together. And you get maybe the sort of you get much better value driven if you do all three things rather than just doing one of them.
Anna?
I think what we've seen is a lot of people looking at rationalising their platforms. So
and choosing to do that in the cloud.
Choosing to do that in the cloud. So I think people were already looking at Azure and moving legacy into the cloud, and now they're looking at the more SaaS type solutions like Dynamics, and I think that helps because it gives you one platform, and actually you can then start to move everything in. If everything's within one place, of course it's going to make responding to GDPR requests easier. What I think it also has done is allowed people to benefit from the same technology and share technology more. So one of the things TISCI's done is built a solution that can track GDPR requests and one for freedom of information. This is using Microsoft standard technology and effectively just allowing public sector organisations to plug and play so they can, this allows self-service so that it's not too much of an internal overhead, and also web tracking through making sure you're meeting these service level agreements for responses. But I think this is a good example of where Dynamics and other Microsoft technologies can really benefit public sector, and I'm very hopeful about the future that we're not always going to recreate the wheel, that we can share IP that has been built in one place and can then be used over and over again.
So anyone who had, say, Dynamics or whatever those tools could just use that IP, switch it on.
Instantly plug and play.
Instantly.
Yeah, and you're ready for GDPR.
Rather than coding something up and building from scratch.
Now, what it doesn't do is tell you where you've got your data. That's not what this tool does. It allows you, though, to track those requests coming in. And I think for some organisations, there may be a large influx. For others, there may not. I think it's very hard to tell. But I do know that when we're getting these requests, what we need to be able to do is actually track where they're at and that we're responding to them, that we're meeting timescales.
Yeah, and speed of response for GDPR is going to become really important because you've got to report an incident in 72 hours, and that seriously ups the game in terms of your internal processes for people realising that something's happened and reporting it through the normal reporting processes. At the minute, the SLA's much longer than that, so. I think that again will bring the focus in on, can I do anything to make this easier for myself? And, can I do anything to automate some of this stuff?
And just showing that you've done the due diligence behind it. Actually, I suspect there will be a certain amount of flexibility around this. If you suddenly get 20 requests together, there's going to have to be, but you do need to prove that that was the case. So actually tracking these requests, and being able to report upon them, being able to share that information and show exactly what you did to respond, I think will become important.
I think as well, with the Facebook Cambridge Analytica story that's broken this week, all of a sudden data and cloud are kind of national news. They're normal, they're not techie things. Everyone's talking about, I use Facebook, they've got my data, it's in the cloud. Do you think that and the ICO going about to start a citizen awareness campaign about you've got rights over your data, do you think that might impact how many people start asking what you're doing with my data and subject?
Must do. Yeah, I mean, in our call centre we see spikes whenever things are on the news and all that kind of stuff. So I would have thought. I mean, I think you're going to get a lot of requests anyway to start with because people will test, through subject access requests what you're keeping. But if something like the Facebook and Cambridge Analytics case runs and runs, people will, I think, start to think about where's my data, and that's where the cloud is actually a real benefit for you, because we lock some of this stuff away quite safely. It's really important that safeguarding cases and things like that aren't easily accessible to people, and it's easier if it's somewhere that's extremely secure and configured to be secure. So.
And I think it's such a fine line. I was chatting to people earlier on about this, and they were actually sort of saying the problem is that what we want is people to benefit from data. So it's about internally being able to benefit from access to data whilst making sure that at the same time we're being secure with it and we're being sensible with it and it's not being used for the wrong purposes. And that's a very complicated subject. And personally, I'm not a great lover of Facebook, and I love it even less now. I actually don't want my data used. Now, I think the true lovers of Facebook will always stick with it. But actually, I think there's a good number of people like myself that have just been, glancing at people's photographs, if you like. Actually, I'd happily take away.
You've just wiped a billion off their stocks.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I like to think I'm that
Kylie Jenner moment.
Kylie Jenner moment.
So that's
Yeah, I don't think I have. Well, actually, in all honesty, though, that it has their stock price is down 10% over this in 2 days. Yeah. That's I think there's a lot of people going to be thinking that. But does that kind of a sort of, it wasn't a breach, it was a kind of a sanctioned data lift and shift in a way. Do you think that gives a bad reputation to cloud?
I don't think people are blaming cloud, are they? I think people are blaming the practice. So I think it's the organisation. I mean, it's a bit like saying I've got a car, and if I drive that car really fast into someone else's car, it's my car manufacturer's fault. I am responsible for my actions behind the wheel of that vehicle. So, certainly the articles, the bits I've read, I haven't said cloud equals bad. Look at that. So. Again, it's like anything. There are risks associated with it. There are risks with building an on-premise data centre. They're different. You've got to be cognizant of them before you make any decision about technology. What's the risk? What's the reward? What are the potential benefits from it? And make a kind of a judgment call as to what you think is right, whilst making sure you're not using information for purposes that people haven't consented to or aren't aware of. So. I don't see it as a cloud problem per se.
I think users increasingly understand the risks. You know, I was quite conscious. My son was 18 the other week, and so I was quite keen to know what he'd done on his 18th. And I said, "Well, there's nothing on Facebook." He said, "Well, I didn't put it on Facebook. It was on Snapchat."
Yeah.
So it disappeared within 20 minutes. So I think he's got a kind of recognition that some stuff I don't want to put in a place where it's enduring and always available and can be scraped and used in whatever way. It could be. My mum won't online bank for almost the same but opposite reasons, really, and that's not secure, that's in the cloud. And I'm going, well, that's much more secure than, beside your bedside table, which is where your checkbook might be and stuff like that. So, I think people are increasingly good at interpreting the risks in their online lives. And I don't think they blame the cloud as such. I think they can distinguish between what different applications offer them and how that's what social media is like for them.
So what about the impact on how people use their data? Do you think that that's going to help raise the national conscience about how people use my data?
Must do, yeah.
I think so. I think it does two things. I actually think it will make people more aware of social engagement, where you can actually look at your brand and see the social. Because I think people blame social media, probably, and associate social media, the Snapchats, the Facebooks, all together. I don't think that unless they're particularly thinking about it, that's why I don't think they think of it as cloud. I don't think anybody just thinks about it. I think it's just online and they use it. But I think people are very aware of that, and I think the companies and organisations are starting to get very aware of how damaging these things are when they hit social media. So not only has it taken data, have Cambridge Analytica taken data from social media, but they're also being killed on social media. That's what's knocking money off their share price. So, that's a whole different side of it.
Yeah.
What it does, it forces data to be a board level discussion. And as somebody who is a data geek at heart, I see that as a very important thing to do. Data is the lifeblood of most businesses these days, isn't it? If you want to run a digital business, you've got to be in control of your data, the information you've got. So this forces more people to think about it, much like the launch of GDPR, whether that's scaremongering or not. But actually, it gets people thinking, actually, we've got this data. If we don't need this, well, we might as well get rid of it. We just don't need that anymore. But actually, this is of real value. Do people know we've got it? Do they know what we're using it for? I think this is for the good of all of us as kind of citizens. I know the EU is kind of leading the charge around data protection. So I don't want to get into what Brexit may impact on that. That's probably a totally different webcast discussion. But I think that's a good thing for all of us that we're kind of having this type of debate and discussion at senior levels within organisations up and down the country.
So looking at data and putting that in the cloud, does that flexibility and the platform use in the cloud, does that enable you to do things in a different way, to do things differently? And having, say, cloud platforms like Office 365, does that enable you to work in a different way? Does it make things possible that maybe you couldn't have done on-premise?
I think it probably does, yeah. Because we're kind of in a sort of hybrid position.
Indeed.
It's a little bit difficult to be definitive about that. I think I'm conscious that we had data warehouses before we had the cloud, and that ability to aggregate data and bring it together into one place definitely changed the game. I'm not sure cloud, in the data sense, has that game-changing feel about it to me, but the fact that you can connect things together much more quickly and easily, the likes of using Office 365 and SharePoint, CRM, all those things must give you advantages that you don't have if you're trying to do that back at the office with bits of Cat5 cable and BT and a couple of other suppliers to try and join it all together. That must be easier to do it in the cloud.
I mean, certainly there's a lot more collaboration tools and techniques that are out there that I found. I mean, things like we're collaborating on documents yesterday with some members of the teams, live editing documents. Yeah. From 5 people in 5 different locations. That wouldn't have been possible a few years back without some of the tools that are out. I mean, some of the stuff around Power BI is pretty damn cool as well.
I think we've got some good examples there as well.
Yeah. So I think it's offering possibilities. So the consideration still needs to be from a privacy and security point of view. Is this do the subjects, are they aware that they've given us this data? And as government, the Department for Education, we had a genuine need for data about the system to be able to fund schools, for example, or to run inspection processes and make a judgment on the quality, which is actually a service that citizens rely on to make fairly fundamental decisions.
But those
We're trying to
don't
put
rest
that-
on
sorry.
consent, though, do they, on the data sharing on that?
Well, do they not? Because we're putting a piece of development into kind of later beta really at the minute around electronic evidence collection in schools. So actually collecting evidence in the classroom, so HMI, using technology and getting the capability to share what they found and all that kind of stuff. And we're starting to think about what we have to say as part of an inspection about GDPR. We might have to issue people a statement to say this is what we're going to collect the data for, this is how we're going to use it, this is how long we'll keep it for, etc., etc. So, and GDPR's come quite late to that, so we've been busily making little tools and power apps over here with some good partners and getting that ready for deployment, and then suddenly people come along and go, well, have you thought about this? And you go, well, we should have done. We have now, and that means we now need to slide this other rather non-technical thing into something that we're trying to have a very good conversation electronically in a classroom, but we have to read off a piece of paper to say, please know this is how we're going to use your data.
But that's partly driven by the evolution of your business process,
it is,
isn't it?
yeah.
So you're doing things different, you're using technology differently, so therefore it's good practice to say, children, parents, this is what we're going to do when we come and visit your school to make that judgment. And I think that's why people looking for definitive guidance around GDPR. It will never be definitive.
Yeah.
It will keep moving. It will keep evolving as technology changes and the way we work changes as well.
But that core change, what we call EEG, that's totally cloud driven. It's driven because we went to 365 and we were able to deploy tools in a different way. It allowed us to do things much more quickly. Discovery was much easier, all that kind of stuff, and that's completely to do with just the cloud-based nature of those applications.
You didn't invest in 500 Payroll cameras instead then, Tom?
No. It's not the year end yet.
Did the DFE?
Couldn't possibly comment.
But I do think that the pace of change of technology is just speeding up all the time, and the consumer technology we use on our phones, etc. It's just there's more and more and more every year. And actually, how would you? I'm not sure. Could anyone put together a business case for an on-premise 10-year capitalisation plan today? Because who knows where we're going to be in 10 years' time?
I don't know. GCHQ might be able to, but I think
Good point. Fair point. They've got a specific.
Not very many organisations could, because you'd have to compare, wouldn't you? You would say, well, I want to build my own infrastructure. I want to own my own tin. Those things are more expensive than they used to be because there's less vending to the likes of me and Darren, because all the tin manufacturers are wanting to sell to Microsoft or Amazon Web Services or whoever it might be. So I can't see how you could make that business case. I think it would be really hard to make. There would have to be a really important business reason. I don't think it would come down to finances.
I'm struggling. I'm trying to think of an industry that would change so little and would need such little kind of digital interaction that might be possible, and I'm really struggling.
Do you think it's easier these days to migrate to cloud than it would be to try and transfer something on-premise? Anna?
I believe it is, very much so. And almost it gets to a point where I find this really difficult because I find it so hard to see their point of view. But I mean, it's much the same, actually. We talk about it as the cloud, but effectively it's not. It's something slightly better in that you can increase the size and the capacity of it in the cloud, as opposed to the box that sits in the corner physically has a hard disk in it and memory in it, and a little man has to come in to increase it, whereas of course in Azure that's completely different.
You just flip the switch,
process, don't you? Yeah, it's not so different actually if you know what you're doing. Now, it's all about education, and I think technology is so much about education. And you were talking about the business case for 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we cannot see what capacity we will need, but with machine learning and AI, that processing power will become very, very significant very, very quickly. So I think you are just, people may perceive it as it being cheaper, but I've always thought if you under budget, you end up throwing it away.
So cloud could be also a driver for innovation, but it actually might not end up as cheap as you think because actually it opens up new possibilities.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think that I've got a couple of worries about it, and I think this is because of where I sit in the kind of the cycle. I'm a little bit behind where DFE were, and I'm wondering, will 4 big mega vendors hold prices at what they're holding them at now? Once they've got everybody into the cloud, what will happen to pricing? So it'd be very good to know what the sort of roadmap looks like on pricing, and that's pretty hard to find. If I were a chief finance officer, I might be worried about that. I'm going to get in quite cheaply. I think there's loads of experience of, it's pretty much commodity now to get into the cloud. I used to worry it was a bit like offshoring in that, simple would be easy. Anything complicated would be hard. But I don't think that's the case. I think, Microsoft and others have proven they can stand up complex applications and they can do that at a decent price. But it's what's my price 5 years in the future? I almost have to make a two times capitalisation cycle to be really confident about what my prices are. So that's going to be really interesting. And I don't know how much they're going to charge in 5 years' time.
Interesting, Anna.
So I'm very much hoping that Microsoft meet my trust on this. I trust them. Our whole of our business is based on it. But I think they have sold Office for years. I don't think they have ever come along and doubled their prices overnight for no apparent reason. We had a small increase to do with Brexit because, of course, of
currency
sterling
variations, yes.
Change in valuation. But actually, I must admit, I think Microsoft have done a good job being a trustworthy organisation, and I guess you just don't grow to billions without it. And I think that's why they're also leading on GDPR and very careful about our data and won't be in the same situation as Facebook. If you look at their website, there are pages and pages of what they are doing. They've worked very hard on this. So I do believe and trust them. I hope other people do. And I think that is why Azure has been such a leading force in this, because some of the slightly smaller guys, and there are some of a similar size to Microsoft, so I think they probably live to the same values. I hope so. I think smaller data centres have done that in the past, but I think this is why Microsoft perhaps are blazing a trail on this, is you do have to trust them. But you can move, of course.
Well, of course.
Well, that's the other element, isn't it? Can I get out of where I am to go somewhere else? Can I move? But how easy is it for me to move? And so what's that whole market look like in the future? That's like, but nobody knows.
I mean, technically possible to move. Obviously, from a cost perspective, I suppose you're not tied down into the long hosting 5-year.
But you've got to do it again.
But you've still got to do the work. So, I found that when working on the migration activities or the kind of transformation at the Department for Education, some of the things that I thought would be really, really hard were actually really, really straightforward, and some of the things that I thought would be really straightforward are actually quite hard. So if you think of Department for Education's corporate record store, SharePoint, migrated SharePoint Online, millions and millions of corporate records, all the official sensitive data that's all held, probably the smoothest bit of the entire programme, migrating that. And I was expecting to come into work, Monday mornings after weekend migration, we run with phone ringing off the hook and loads of emails saying, "What the hell have you done with all that?" Nothing. Oh, it's all fine actually. But then some of the smaller applications, particularly the kind of 10, 12-year-old in-house bespoke applications, we just found that there are a few things that probably shouldn't have been moved to cloud, and actually we should have retired those and built something else. So, but what the advantage that Tom's got is you can take my scars and kind of learn from some of them.
Thanks for
because
that.
Actually, when we were doing this 3 years ago, suppliers were very good at saying, "Yeah, we've done all that. We've worked on these major migration programs," and then some of the suppliers we got in, it became quite clear fairly quickly that was not necessarily 100% true. Not Tisky, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't have joined. But there weren't so many other people to talk to. People were still at the stage of, is it safe? How can we do it? So we couldn't learn from other people's mistakes. Absolutely. So we can now share that out. Well, I've known Tom for a good few years, particularly around this activity. Go and learn from what we've done. Tom, come and speak to it.
If you look at the sort of business examples they used to advertise the cloud sort of 4 or 5 years ago, it was things like the Olympics. But the Olympics is a one-off. It's close to greenfield, whereas now there's a lot more examples of brownfield, actual built applications being moved across into the cloud, and that's much more mature from a business perspective than standing up the Olympics. It's a really big job, but you are kind of starting from scratch.
Yes, they had the luxury of being able to start with a clean slate and build what they needed, which actually the public sector has decades of technology and legacy to bring along on that. But looking back at going back to the discussion we were having earlier about data and innovation, with all of the new technologies like AI, machine learning, robotic process automation, Internet of Things, there are going to be vast amounts of data. Does cloud enable that innovation? Could it end up being prohibitively large, the amounts of data points you're getting back from Internet of Things? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think so. I think cloud has to underpin that. It's impossible to see how you could do it without being able to draw on that.
So is it just
kind
that
of
technology
capacity.
has now moved, that's the norm? That's kind of almost the commodity norm. If you're
I
going
think
to do
technology needs a cloud.
Yeah.
In a way, it would hold technology back if there wasn't the capability there to, just produce that kind of power and capability that only the cloud can give you. I'm sure the Internet of Things would work, but it would work better if it's underpinned by the cloud.
Darren?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's quite exciting what the next few years is going to hold. Certainly for public services. So some of the work that we've been doing in the past few months, working with sort of smart cities agendas and how we might automatically capture data using IoT. It's kind of quite a fascinating thing. Certainly, someone who's been a civil servant for most of their working life up until now, get the opportunity to get involved in some of this stuff is groundbreaking and quite fascinating. So where it will go, who knows? But to emphasise Tom's point, there's I just can't see it working without the cloud at all. The cloud is fundamental to the success.
Anna, I mean, you've obviously you've put your whole business built on the cloud, and you've trusted in Microsoft along the way on this. Where do you see it? It's exciting.
It's really exciting, and I think it's really exciting for public sector. I think this is what we've needed. We've been trying in public sector to always get more from the same. Budgets don't really increase that much year on year. We have to look at efficiency, look at how we can use technology. And so for a long time, I've worked in this field for over 20 years. So, for a long time, it's just a data repository.
Yep.
And then we've got business intelligence with Power BI, and that's exciting. So we can now see our data and we can make predictions from looking at the past. And now we've got something that's going to tell us about the future. So if we know when we need a large team of people because we're getting a lot of freedom of information requests or GDPR requests, or we can respond to them in an automated style even using machine learning because we actually can get those answers automatically. Now that's exciting. If somebody can start to tell me the future by using technology, I can really become efficient then. So, and that's really just the tip of the iceberg. You can then start looking at bots and other things. But I think it's really important that people take that first step. Self-service is great. Yes, we have to share a bit of data to get there, but self-service is allowing the public and the citizens, wherever they are, to actually self-serve and have a happy experience without having to take up very precious resources who, perhaps aren't as informed as they might be. So, it's about taking small steps forward, but technology is going to force us all forward in the next 5 years. I think it will be life-changing.
What would you say to that?
Can't disagree with that, really. I think there's a little element to it which isn't as kind of exciting, really, which is I think standardization is quite important. We've got to get to a place where, particularly in government, data sets talk to each other. And interoperate in a way than they do, a better way than they do right now. 'Cause otherwise, you end up with a whole pile of data in the cloud, but you can't make head nor tail of it because date fields are different and all that kind of stuff. So that is maybe trailing a little bit behind, and it's a really big job. It's like, how do you get HMRC and DWP and people like that to agree what they call anything? And that is hard but I think that will eventually hold things back, because you've got all that data, but how do you make any sense of it?
We'll talk a bit about that later. Yeah. I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough to talk about this on camera, but data lake, I believe.
I was going to say data lakes, and I believe, isn't AI and machine learning, can't it? I mean, obviously, standards are key to being able to interoperate.
At this stage.
At this stage. Do you think that at some point that technology will get faster?
Changing. Yeah, I think it will.
I think it will as well.
Yeah,
I think
it's pretty much there.
Because standards require people, and they require time, and they require committees, and I think you need to have a different tool to throw at it. You need to be able to put something in there which can mash things up and make some sense out of something. Yeah.
Darren, do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of exciting work done around things like registers and
Yes,
data standards, which is.
But they're terribly difficult to get off the ground, and as you say, get people to agree and use them and roll them out and stuff.
Well, I'm sure if you go within Ofsted, it's certainly true in Department for Education. You ask people how many schools there are, you get a different answer. Because you'd say, well, you mean schools that we're funding for this?
Well, what's a school?
Yes.
Well, what's a school?
What do you mean by school?
Is it an academy? Is it a school? And you have that kind of debate, which is, I just want to know how many schools there are. It seems quite straightforward. My children go to school. That's what school looks like. So how many of them have you got? They look a bit like that.
Yeah.
But people call the same thing something slightly different.
Yes.
And that just means your systems can't talk together. You operate in slightly different silos, approaches, and then you're forcing internal barriers, which, from an internal efficiency point of view, is a bit rubbish, really, because you want people to be able to use technology and be comfortable with technology. And if it's slightly different, whether in Team A, Team B, or Team C, it's a bit of a waste of opportunity there.
As that quite often is human nature, wanting to be different and wanting to have their unique way of doing things, it's quite exciting that actually we may not be able to shift that, but if we can get the technology, if the technology can understand that and translate on the fly, that opens up whole new borders as long as we comply with GDPR on how we use data.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunities. I think we shouldn't hide behind this as a reason not to move forward. That's the other thing, is technology moves, but we have to move with it. We can't wait for the holy grail of everything. But I think, we've started doing some business transformation services, and it's really going back to what you were saying originally, which is taking the business with us. We must take the business along with us. We do need to standardise process. Normally systems don't fail because of the technology. It's the people, it's the process behind it. We must actually engage with the business. This is not about doing it to you, it's about taking you with us. And I think that's really quite critical, and will remain so, actually, along the way.
Well, sadly, we are running out of time, and I've got a few minutes left. And what I would really like to just know, just final comments to the question, is there any valid reason for an organisation in the public sector not to be migrating to the cloud today or thinking about it? Tom, let's start with you.
None at all. I don't think it's where you should go. Don't think I don't think anybody would argue against that.
Anna?
I'd say it's not a reason; it's an excuse. It's harsh but true.
Really? Okay, Darren.
Unless you've made a decision to purchase a whole load of tin in the last year or two, and I'm not sure
the last 6 years,
how you would have done it, then I'm just kind of struggling to think of why you would do that.
So cloud first in the public sector.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed since 2013 in terms of the government's agenda. So I think it's important people get on board. It's fun. I'd love to do it again.
You've got the scars to prove it.
Except they're just about healed now.
Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for joining us, our viewers at home. And thank you, Tom Zebedee, Anna Assassa, and Darren Bassett. Thank you for joining us. And we'll be talking about digitising policing on UK Live on the 19th of April, so hopefully you can join us then. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.